This bill is set down for third reading next sitting day. I therefore call on Government Order of the Day number 2.
Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf Environmental Effects Bill interrupted debate on second reading.
Honourable members, when the last time this bill was being read at the second reading, the Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf Bill, the Honourable Member Jackie Dean was speaking, and she has 6 minutes and 30 seconds remaining if she wishes to continue. She does. I call the Honourable Member Jackie Dean.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's with pleasure I rise to speak to the EEZ bill in its second reading, and just perhaps to settle the House down and to the purpose of this bill. It sets up an environmental management regime for New Zealand's economic zone, which of course is the part between the 12-mile and the 200-mile limit, and also the continental shelf. So what the bill does is provides a legislative framework which is lacking at the moment. In fact, it's missing altogether, and puts processes in place to assess and to manage environmental effects in our oceans, to provide greater certainty to investors, of which there are a few, and also existing interests, of which there also are a few. It is also there to assist in meeting New Zealand's international obligations, and the bill aims, and I believe achieves in its aim, to do this in the most efficient and effective way possible, and it is this government's desire, in the absence of legislation for the EEZ area, to do this without delay. Mr. Speaker, this bill isn't intended to be the RMA of the seas, if you like. The RMA was designed prominently as a piece of legislation relating to land-based issues, and that piece of legislation, the RMA, reflects a multitude of interacting parties and interacting issues, and so therefore would not make sense in our relatively, and it is relatively, uncrowded marine environment. So current levels of activity in the EEZ and the continental shelf are low, and indications that New Zealand will not see a large number of new operations in the next 10 years. In fact, the number of activities needing consent will amount to, say, a handful in each year. Clause 19, I just briefly want to talk about, sets out a general duty to avoid, remedy or mitigate adverse environmental effects, and this includes a duty to provide training and supervision to all employees to ensure compliance with the legislation, with the regulations and consent conditions, as well as sufficient resources, and also to establish appropriate management systems. These things are critical in the management of our EEZ. So an impact assessment will form the basis for all consent applications, so that the EPA, the Environment Protection Agency, can assess the effects on the environment and also on existing interests. The EPA will be the decision maker for marine consents, and that is the difference between land-based activities, which are governed by the RMA. In this instance, it is the EPA which will be the decision maker for all marine consents. It's interesting to note, just finally in my brief intervention in this debate, that between 1999 and 2008, 46 wells were drilled in the EEZ with no legislation in place to protect the environment. It's disappointing, therefore, Mr. Speaker, that both Labour and the Greens intend to vote against this bill. They obviously prefer a legislative vacuum. Thank you.
Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.